Hello, this is Rina Rashid from Rashid Arosovic LLP, Immigration and Citizenship Lawyers in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'm here today again on our weekly live broadcast to talk about the impact that COVID-19 measures have had on Canada's immigration processing and travel and things like that. So I hope that everyone is still safe and healthy. Today I'm going to talk about the updates, actually. About a month ago, I talked about how travel and immigration were impacted by COVID-19 measures. And in the last month or so, so many things have changed. So we thought it would be a good idea to just update the last video that we did. Last week, Yelena talked about COVID-19 measures and its impact on family sponsorship applications. And if you weren't able to join her live, the video and all of the other videos that we've done over the last 4 weeks are on our firm's Facebook page. So it's Rashid Arosovic LLP. Make sure that you have a look at them. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send us an email, or you can book free 15-minute consultations with us. We've posted the links to our calendar on the firm's Facebook page and on our own individual Facebook pages, and we periodically do that. I'll be doing that later this afternoon when I update this video. So turning to today's topic, what has stayed the same since I last spoke about this topic 4 weeks ago? Well, one thing that's definitely remained in place and probably won't change for the near future is the mandatory 14-day quarantine requirement. The government is very serious about this. They've put in measures to monitor quarantine and also verify that individuals are actually complying with this order. It comes from the Quarantine Act, and there are fines and possible imprisonment attached to breaching the mandatory quarantine requirement. So what does this entail? What is it that you need to do in order to comply with the requirements? Well, as soon as you enter Canada, the first thing that you need to do is go directly to the place where you are going to quarantine. So that means that before you get to Canada, you have had to identify a place where you can spend 14 days. If you are a returning citizen or permanent resident of Canada and you have a place to stay, like your own home, then that's not an issue. But if you are coming to Canada, let's say you were residing somewhere else and you are now returning to Canada, you need to identify a place where you can spend 14 days. And that might not be as easy as it sounds. For example, we've had clients who told us that they've tried to make reservations at hotels or similar type establishments to stay for the 14 days, and they thought it would be pretty straightforward. But what we're being told is that not every location, not every hotel is willing to take individuals to quarantine. And this could be for a variety of reasons. They might not be open, or they're not willing to take the risk that someone might have the COVID-19 virus. So you have to make sure that you have this plan in place. You might be asked about this plan before you board the plane. So the airline staff that you first encounter before you are given your boarding pass, they might ask you. You're definitely going to be asked when you arrive at any of the Canadian border points. So once you have arrived in Canada and you know where it is that you're going, you have to go directly to that place, and you can't stop at points in between. So this means as well that you need to make arrangements to have food in that location. For example, when I returned from traveling abroad Quarantine at that time was not mandatory, but I did comply with the requirement. And I, called home and asked a family member to make sure that my fridge was stocked and that I would have food for a period of time. And over those 14 days, I had my brother dropping off food at my front door so that I could comply with the requirement of not having to go anywhere, because you can't even go to the grocery store. So if you need medication or you need cleaning supplies or anything like that, you need to ensure that it is going to be at your quarantine location before you get there, and that you will have someone who's able to assist you in getting it periodically if you happen to run out. You also have to use private transportation to get to your quarantine location. You can't use public transportation or a taxi. And you can't make any unnecessary stops, I just mentioned. So that means you can't go do your groceries, you can't pump gas. And if you do have to, stop for gas for whatever reason, the government's asking that you pay at the pump and not have to go in, to limit the contact that you have with too many people, basically, is what they're trying to ensure. And this quarantine requirement, the only exception to it is people who are providing essential services. So, for example, truck drivers who cross the border regularly don't have to quarantine for 14 days every time they enter Canada. What is also still in place is that anyone who is symptomatic, so anyone who has a fever, a cough, or respiratory issues, will not be permitted to enter Canada by air. They are, however, permitted to enter by land border. And individuals who have not yet landed, but their applications were approved before March 18th, are also allowed to travel to Canada. We get a lot of questions about biometrics. So there's been an automatic extension for biometrics from the regular 30 days to 90 days, and that is still in place, and there's no need to ask for an extension. In biometrics collections, for the most part, has been suspended due to the social distancing requirements. So inside Canada, in the United States, that's pretty much the story. There are a few ports of entry in Canada where they're doing biometrics collection, and only in very limited circumstances. So our advice would be to check with the specific port that you're thinking of going to, and making an appointment to ensure that you're not going to be wasting your time. It's not a wasted trip. Outside of Canada, internationally, most of the VACs they've been closed at least for the last 4 weeks or so. But as we know, and we've been hearing in the news, some countries are slowly opening up. So you need to check with the VAC where you had your appointment or are intending to do the biometrics, and check to see if they are open. And again, scheduling an appointment is the best thing to do. Flagpoling continues to be a no-no at the ports. So don't think that you can easily extend your stay or get a work permit by flagpoling. CBSA is not entertaining this at this time. And international students who had approvals before March 18th, they are also permitted to travel to Canada. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit later when I talk about some of the confusion that's been going on with regards to travel and the requirements and the exemptions. So a few things that have changed in the last 4 weeks is that the IRCC call center is now open as of the 27th of April. It is operating on reduced capacity and is only open from Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern time. And they're asking that we all just bear with them. There's going to be technological issues because the agents are working remotely. So they're just asking for our understanding with that. But everyone can continue to submit inquiries via the web form 24/7. That's always an option. What's also changed is the landing process. Most recently, and we've experienced this with our clients as well, is that they are just receiving a letter from IRCC stating that they've landed and that they need to send just pictures for their PR cards. And that letter is very important to hang on to, because if they intend, or if you have received one of these letters, hang on to it. And every time you travel, you should keep it with you until you receive your permanent resident card. Applying for a visitor visa has also changed. This is, it's become more of a complex issue because of the exemptions and this essential requirement that Canada Border Services is applying. So in order to, only certain individuals can apply for a visitor visa at this time. And they must show that their travel is not discretionary, and that they fall within one of the exemptions. So for example, if they are working in the medical field, or they fall under one of the exemption categories that they can properly demonstrate, then they can apply for a visitor visa. But if they cannot demonstrate this, then a regular visitor who just wants to come to visit Canada, or on recreation or tourism, is not allowed to. Well, they will not be processing those applications at this time. What's also changed is that international students are getting a bit of a break. They are allowed to work on a temporarily, started about a week or so ago, that they're permitted to work more than 20 hours if they are providing an essential service, and they can work off campus. They must, however, have a valid study permit. Temporary foreign workers are exempt from the travel restrictions if they're outside Canada and can travel to Canada by land or air, as long as they are coming for an essential purpose. So before, it seemed like there was this blanket exemption for temporary foreign workers, and now we've received clarification. I believe it even might have been as soon as yesterday. We received clarification that temporary foreign workers must be coming to perform a job that is essential in nature. And I'm going to go into a little bit about what this term essential means. They also need to make sure that they can document that the job that they're coming to do is still available. So the business is still open and running, and the job is still available for them. Much like temporary foreign workers, immediate family members fall under an exemption category. And it has been clarified to us that this is not a blanket exemption either. Immediate family members need to show that they're coming to Canada for a non-discretionary reason, and not for reasons that are optional, like tourism, recreation, or entertainment. And they need to present documentation to show that they are the relationship between them and the individual who is a Canadian resident, Canadian citizen or permanent resident. And it's not enough to say that you just want to come and stay with your family member. That is not necessarily in and of itself would be considered mandatory travel. And I'll go into that in a little bit. Family reunification, we've also received some clarification on this with regards to foreign nationals who want to travel to Canada to be with their foreign national family member who is residing in Canada. They must receive written authorization from a Canadian official, so either at the visa office, or someone who is designated to provide this authorization. So, as I mentioned, the foreign national who is residing in Canada is allowed to have their immediate family member come and stay with them under this family reunification. So if a foreign national is working in Canada and their spouse must come and stay with them, they must receive the written authorization. And I'm assuming that within this written authorization, the foreign national who is outside of Canada must demonstrate as well that the travel is essential and that they're not just coming for a short visit, for example. There's been a lot of confusion around what essential means and versus optional or discretionary. Within the Orders in Council, so the law that has been passed by the Canadian government, nowhere in there does it use the term essential. It uses the word optional or discretionary. And what our clients have been experiencing, and it's very frustrating and traumatic, that they travel to Canada and think that they're going to be permitted entry because they fall under the immediate family member exemption or temporary foreign worker exemption, only to have CBSA deny them entry. And that means that they're then put on a plane and sent back to their country of citizenship. Depending on when that flight is, they might not even be allowed to see their family member because they're not allowed to leave the airport. There have been instances where the foreign national has been allowed to leave the airport, but their passports are seized and they're given a time to return, and they must report back to CBSA in order to get their passport to leave. So our experience with regards to essential and essential travel is that it must be very well documented. If you're planning on traveling to Canada to reunite with a family member, or you have to demonstrate that you must be here. So for example, if you have a parent who's living in Canada and they need you to come take care of them. One of the clarifications that was just posted on IRCC's website yesterday is that you also have to demonstrate that no one else is available to do this for them. So you are the person who must be able to do this. How do you get this kind of documentation, and what kind of documentation it is will be very particular to your circumstance. So we do advise you to seek advice before taking any steps. So before buying your plane ticket, and before talking to a doctor or whoever it is that you need to get the documentation from, please, you can call us, or if you already have a lawyer, get in touch and make sure that you have a proper package put together. Otherwise, you could be in the situation that one of our clients experienced not too long ago, and they were actually traveling with their Canadian citizen spouse trying to enter Canada. And CBSA found that the fact that they were living abroad together and that they wanted to enter Canada together, to remain in Canada together, was not sufficient reason to let the foreign national spouse remain in Canada. And unfortunately, that individual had to get on a flight and go to their country of citizenship. So it's very, very important in order to avoid these kinds of situations that can lead to just absolute frustration. Make sure that you seek legal advice first, get all your ducks in a row, and understand what the risks are that you're getting into. Because while it might say on the website immediate family members are exempt, that's not necessarily the case. Another area of confusion is whether one is departing from any country other than the United States. If you're coming on an airplane, obviously the only way you can get here if you're not coming from the United States, you have to be covered by one of the exemptions, and you have to show that you are not traveling for an essential purpose. So you're going to be possibly asked by airline staff to provide this documentation up front. And then that documentation is going to be, again, scrutinized by CBSA, even if you're allowed to get on the flight. So going back to the example I mentioned earlier, our client had been scrutinized on 2 separate occasions by Canadian government staff abroad, and then scrutinized again once they got here. They were scrutinized again by CBSA, and CBSA found the exact same documentation to be insufficient to allow the foreign national spouse to enter Canada. So it's not enough that, and CBSA's response to the client was that the documentation from the Canadian government officials abroad didn't specifically state that the travel was not optional or discretionary. So the wording that they're looking for and the type of documentation they're looking for is very specific. The Canadian Bar Association executives have asked for very clear guidance, and we are still waiting for it. So we're sort of all operating in this gray area and just hoping for the best and trying to prepare our clients in the best way possible to ensure that once they get here, things will move along smoothly. So if an individual is traveling from the United States, they could be prohibited from entering Canada if their travel is optional or discretionary. So regardless of where you're traveling from, you have to demonstrate that the travel is not optional or discretionary. And the onus is on the foreign national to convince CBSA of this. So just a couple of questions that we've gotten over the last week or so. We've gotten a lot of questions from individuals who are in Canada on the international experience class type work permit. And understandably, these individuals are sort of experiencing a lot of stress right now because these types of work permits in most instances are not extendable. And also that coupled with the fact that they might not have the proper or all of their documents to submit their express entry profile. So they want to know what they can do to extend their work permit if it's about to expire. And really there's very little that can be done in these circumstances if they can't switch from one program to another or get an employer specific work permit. They can't just extend the IEC work permit. Like a working holiday category type work permit, for example, is not just automatically extendable just by submitting an application for an extension. If the individual might have, in those circumstances, their only option would be to return to their home country. And then that leads into another question that we've been receiving is, and not just from IEC work permit holders, but but from individuals in this situation whose status is about to expire and they can't find a flight home because air travel has been cut by about 90% in the last month. What are they supposed to do? Well, immigration officials are not budging on the fact that you must maintain valid immigration status at all times. And that might mean that you have to apply to change your status from that of a worker to a visitor. And if that's the situation, then you have to make sure that you make this application before your work permit expires to ensure that you have implied status, and also to maintain your valid immigration status at all times, because you don't want this to negatively impact on your express entry application for permanent residence later on. So if you are going to have to change your status from that of a worker to a visitor, this also means that you cannot work. And work needs to cease on the day that your work permit expires. If your status is already expired, let's say your work permit is going to expire today or it expired yesterday, you should be taking steps immediately to restore your status. And a restoration application has to be done within 90 days of the expiry of your work permit. So it's something to keep in mind. We're still not sure what the processing times will be for these types of applications, but the onus is on you to get the application in during the mandatory period, so within 90 days. So this next question has caused a lot of confusion for people. So I have a work permit and it's a valid work permit. I was working in Canada. I left to go on vacation, and would I be allowed to re-enter Canada? So we've been hearing conflicting stories about the individuals in these kinds of situations. It comes down to this essential, non-discretionary, optional interpretation by CBSA again. So what was happening is that even if an individual had a valid work permit and was already working, if the type of work that they were doing was not seen to be essential, then CBSA was not permitting them re-entry into Canada. So this is something that needs to be clarified and documented again before trying to enter Canada. CBSA is taking this very seriously. They're applying the test very, very strictly in limiting the types of the categories of individuals that will be allowed to enter Canada. So this pretty much do I have any questions? Yes, good morning. Refugee cases. Work permits for refugees is extendable, but as with every type of application that's being processed right now, everything is taking longer because of the reduction in the in IRCC's labor force, the number of applications that they're dealing with, having to move resources from one sector to another. So everyone just needs to have a little bit of patience right now. And as long as you submitted your application within the requisite time period, you are in implied status until you receive a decision on that application. So if you've done your part, then you can continue on and when you get the decision, then whatever it is, you can deal with it at that time. And do I have any other questions? Doesn't seem so. So that takes me to the end of today's live broadcast. Just a reminder again that Yelena and I are offering free consultations to assist individuals with their immigration questions, concerns during this unusual period that we're experiencing. The details for booking the consultation can be found on our Facebook pages. As I mentioned, I'll repost it again later today. And next week, we'll tune in at 11 a.m. on Thursday, and Yelena is going to be updating us, educating us about the impact of COVID-19 measures on express entry. So plan to join us then, send us your questions, and if you know someone, or if you are traveling to Canada since these travel restrictions have been put in place, share your experiences with us. We want to hear what's going on and what people are having to deal with. We are here to assist you. And if you have any questions, as I said, please send them our way. Everyone's situation is different, so it's important that you not listen to what someone else has experienced or what someone else has told. Get advice based on your particular circumstances, and we are here to assist you with that. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope everyone stays safe and healthy. Till next Thursday. Bye-bye.